He's playing against Michael Barger, who is playing green-white aggro.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the green-white decks, the green-white aggro decks, are kind of somewhere on the spectrum between, aggressive, good-rate creatures versus a populate token theme. Where does Michael's list fall?
Well, he has 4 main deck copies of Rootborn Defenses and 2 copies of God's Willings to protect his creatures. He has a main deck Tristani, 4 Advents, and 4 Celestia Charms. That's sort of his base of tokens and populate effects. He is playing 4 copies of Fleecemane Lion in lieu of Call the Conclave, which is a little interesting to me given his creature base, but he does have more populate effects in the main deck than most builds of this deck do, with the main deck Tristani alongside 4 Rootborn Defenses.
Now, both players starting off with the traditional standard opening of Scryland. Who generally has the advantage in these matchups in your experience?
I think that the blue-white control list is, generally speaking, favored, assuming that they have the right mixture of some light bounce and removal spells. The major risk in the matchup is Rootborn Defenses. That's the card that the blue-white deck can get killed by because, the green-white aggro deck builds up his board, induces a Supreme Verdict, you have Rootborn Defenses there, the game can be over. So if you have enough Detention Spheres or even things like Celestial Flare or Cyclonic Rift to bridge the gap, I think the blue-white list is generally favored, but if green-white can get out in front and then close the game out with a Rootborn Defenses, that's a very challenging game plan for blue-white control to beat.
One of the advantages that Eric has with his particular list is Dispel. Dispel, he's got a couple copies of Dispel, which is so good against Rootborn Defenses, Advent of the Worm, anything like that. And then he has also just got a nice mix of cheap interaction like Glare of Heresy and Last Breath.
Yeah, Eric's list definitely feels like it is tuned to beat other aggressive decks. Main deck copies of Celestial Flare, no Aetherling in the list. That's a cost that you pay in the control mirrors because you don't have access to an Aetherling. But I think game 1 against a beatdown deck, he's much happier with this sort of build than some of the more traditional blue-white or Esper Light lists.
So Michael starts the party off with a Fleecemane Lion that is syncopated, deciding what to do for Act 2, and it looks like Experiment 1 is the plan.
And no follow-up from Michael.
Well, he's probably on the end step Celestia Charm plan just for the beatdown. It sounds like he's trying to just make things awkward on Eric's mana.
And that's an important recipe for beating these blue-white and Esper control lists, is making them be inefficient with their mana or with their counterspells.
Here we're seeing a 2/2 Vigilance creature. But this still only represents 2 points of damage. What's he got to do in order to put enough pressure on Jace? I mean, is it just play another, play a third threat right now and risk getting blown out by Supreme Verdict?
Yeah, I mean, he still has to advance his board a little bit. He does have access to Rootborn Defenses in hand, so if he could get another creature in play and protect his team with Rootborn Defenses, that's a plan. But I think for the time being, he's just going to have to attack this Jace semi-honestly because the risk of getting hit with Supreme Verdict here if he taps too low is very high.
Now, it looks like he's deciding between Unflinching Courage, which would put a little extra pressure on Jace right now, versus playing a third threat, which would power up the Experiment 1, versus just committing with what he has. And he does decide he wants to leave Rootborn Defenses up.
So it looks like he ignores Jace altogether and simply goes at Eric. Wow. Very aggressive line of play here.
The Jace flip reveals a Detention Sphere and 2 land.
I would imagine here the split is Detention Sphere versus lands. And Detention Sphere is so valuable for blue-white control in this matchup as, again, you need permanent answers to tokens. You don't want to be playing into Rootborn Defenses.
Eric, it looks like plenty of answers in his hand. He's got access to Detention Sphere, Supreme Verdict. He's got a couple Celestial Flares. Things are generally going pretty well, right? Like he just wants to protect protect the Jace. And now that he has a Mutavault on defense, he potentially already has Michael brick-walled.
Yeah, he doesn't have him brick-walled this turn because Jace's shields are down, but the following turns, if he's plussing Jace, then Jace plussing plus Mutavault locks down Michael's entire board as it stands.
It looks like, yeah, and Michael's is probably just going to be setting up the end step populate anyway in order to make a second token and grow the Experiment 1. But with Experiment 1 Detention Sphere, how much will that change? I'm guessing he wants to do either, I mean, he likely wants to do it anyway, right? Just so that he can kill Jace?
Yeah, I would imagine. I mean, he can't let Jace go unchecked here. The problem is that this Rootborn Defenses is sort of his ace in the hole. He wants to save that for Supreme Verdict if he can develop his board, but he might be in a position now where he simply has to advance his board and just make a play.
Yeah, I mean, he's got Celestia Charm, so he has another potential option if he just wants to go that way. He has the Unflinching Courage.
That runs right into the jaws of the Celestial Flare. That's a huge turn for Eric.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you got to make a judgment call, and it doesn't always pan out.
And I think Eric was trying to navigate that board, having respect for the possibility of Advent of the Worm, which is one of the most powerful cards that Green-White can have in general, and then specifically in that spot. But I don't think Eric could have dreamed up of a better turn than Unflinching Courage, your guy, and attack me.
Yep, unfortunately. Which, I mean, at this point, what does Michael need to do to be able to get a chance to get back in this? Because it looks like Eric's just running away with it at this point.
The problem now is Azorius Charm is a huge insurance policy that Eric has in the face of a potential Advent of the Worm. He would ideally like to get Advent and then some populate effects going, but Eric's list has a lot of answers to that sort of stuff. He has a bunch of Azorius Charms, Celestial Flares, Detention Spheres, so even setting aside Supreme Verdict, which is still a problem that Michael needs to get through at some point down the line, he has a lot of answers in the interim to the medium risk cards that Michael can generate.
Now we see an Experiment 1, and he's got enough for a second wave here with the Celestia Charm and 2 Rootborn Defense. Is that 2 Rootborn Defenses and a Fleeceman line, or just 1 Rootborn Defense?
His hand right now is Rootborn Defenses, Celestia Charm, which he's casting, and the Fleecemane Lion. But now we're back in the spot where Jace plussing plus Mutavault holds off Michael's team. So Michael again needs to advance his board even further to try to push through this. These blue-white decks are so lean and efficient and brutal.
Absolutely. It's amazing what you can do if you have Sphinx's Revelation to count on to take care of all the rest for you. You just need a bunch of answers in the meantime.
Just keep it cheap.
Yeah.
Just keep it cheap.
Just the way I like it.
Make your land drops. A lot of it will take care of itself.
And it's funny, it's easy to forget just how finely tuned these blue-white decks are now. They didn't just make themselves. I mean, this is the result of millions of people playing week in and week out, and the world getting better and better and better of an understanding of the format.
There's a lot of decks that had that sort of evolution to them. I think Elves and Legacy is the one that stands out to me the most, but a lot of lists is just a matter of time figuring out what the right mix and matching of counter spells and answer cards and what have you. So this Experiment 1 I think is going at Jace right now. Now that's a 3-3.
Looks like Mutavault blocking the 1/2 token. Experiment 1 potentially eating an Azorius Charm.
Yep. Once the blue-white deck gets out in front of you like this, it is really hard to come back.
Yeah, I mean, Michael at this point is forced, he's kind of just resigned to playing the game that Eric wants to be playing here.
So he still has Mutavault in front of the Celestia Charm token, and now is asking Michael, is there anything you want to do? As right now, it's a 1/2 because of the Jace trigger.
Sure would be nice if you had a call token right now. With the copy. Not that it matters.
I don't think it would matter too much in the scheme of things. So here's Rootborn Defenses by Michael. This is basically playing right into Eric's hand, as now Michael is tapped out, has used the Rootborn defenses, and this sets the stage for Supreme Verdict.
And here we do see the verdict. Jace continuing to plus. And Eric doesn't even bother attacking because he'd rather just hold up a counterspell and keep an iron grip on the game.
He knows the top card is Experiment 1 too, but he's so far ahead that he has the luxury of being a little inefficient. He can win the game eventually, however.
Exactly. You know, play around that one last card in his hand. Why leave anything to chance?
Jace minuses, finds a Jace and a Temple. And you can see why Eric's list does not actually need to play a creature in it. He's capable of winning the game just like this. He can eventually go ultimate with Jace, maybe plus Elspeth a couple of times, but or just win with Mutavault beatdowns. It's not a requirement for him to actually play a threat on the table and deal lethal that way. He can just take his sweet time.
Yeah, instead let every card be used for defense in some capacity. And, another Detention Sphere takes care of the last threat. The Mutavault beatdown finally commences.
Now that Eric has enough mana left over to hold up Dissolve, he'll probably start going beatdowns.
Now Michael did draw the best card that he could have right here, Advent of the Worm. But it's going to take a lot more of those, right?
Well, if he draws a bunch of Advents back to back to back to back, maybe we have something going on here, but with 2 Dissolves in hand and now Revelations that Eric's picked up, it's very hard.
Revelation is going to be the nail in the coffin. Now, what does Michael have in the sideboard to try to turn this one around in game 2?
Some Mistcutter Hydras.
That's good.
Pithing Needle and Ajani.
All right.
Got a little something. But from this state right now, this is a done deal.
And Eric on the other side of it, as we said, he's actually got a fair bit with Dispels, Glare of Heresy, possibly Celestial Flare. Do you think there's any chance Eric's going to actually want Fated Retribution or Last Breath?
Probably not Last Breath on the draw, maybe on the play. I think Fated Retribution's pretty good against green decks in general. Although now, I think that Last Breath might be coming in as Michael has just shown Voice of Resurgence. So that combined with Experiment 1 might be enough.
Yeah, he's got, Eric doesn't know it yet, but he has access to Soldier of the Pantheon. And then obviously the Celestia Charm, if it stays in, is another Last Breathable target. But it doesn't always hit Experiment 1. And it never hits the Lion.
And Tristani.
That's true. It does hit.
The juiciest Last Breath target one could imagine.
That's a nice little one. Yeah. Let me take a look at that $2 5 of yours. What do you like from journeying to Nyx for these blue-white decks? Have you seen anything that? I mean, I know one of the big topics has been Deicide. Do you think Deicide could end up? I mean, Eric's playing a main deck Revoke Existence. Is that going to turn into a Deicide?
I was going to say, I think it's reasonable for it to replace the Revoke in these lists. You see, Michael trying to slog through Eric's defenses here, pushing through a Mutavault with the Rootborn defenses, but Eric with Revelations in hand, just trying to set up a stable board to fire off this Rev. But yeah, it certainly seems like an upgrade over the Revoke, as you primarily want Revoke in the deck. It is flexible, it answers a couple different cards, but Thassa and Erebos are on the top of the list of the cards you're trying to fight with that thing. And Boon Satyr as well, I suppose.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, I could see people actually playing a couple Deicides. It's tricky because obviously with the with enchantment removal that good, there's less of a there's kind of pressure on you to not play enchantments, but Journey to Nyx has so many good ones.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it'll be interesting to see just how much enchantment removal people end up playing in the season to come.
So you see Eric there deploy his main deck Jace Memory Adept. This is also something that he's fully capable of winning the game with, either by decking or going ultimate. He's also just drawn Elspeth off the Jace, so that might be the last piece of the puzzle to lock up game one.
The desperation Boone Sater.
Maybe a while ago this would have made a difference, but not with the way it is now.
Michael continuing to try to present some sort of an offensive, but Eric about to bury him under a Sphinx's Revelation.
Yep. And the writing's on the wall here if you're in Michael's seat, because Eric isn't even bothering to cast anything or even block with a Mutavault to protect his Jace. He has some plan with all of his mana, and with that much mana, it can really only be this.
Absolutely. So there's 8 more cards, and Eric's up to 26. Yeah, there's a few good options in Journey into Nyx. The green decks, these green-white decks, how much do they actually gain? I mean, there's some 2-drops, but is there anything actually good enough to go in their deck?
I don't know. The ceiling on what their creatures look right now is already super high.
Right.
I mean, these decks are not lacking for quality creatures to put into play.
What about the combat trick, the multi-kicker combat trick, where the green one that makes your guys +1/+1 and indestructible?
What's the rate on them?
It's like what is it? It's like 1 in a green, instant, make a guy +1/+1, indestructible, and have tap to fight this turn. And then it has strive of 1, so you can choose as many extra targets as you want by paying an extra mana.
It seems a little pricey. It could, if you're in the market for the fight effect, I think it could be a good mixture. But you already have Rootborn Defenses or Mending Touch as your indestructible anti-Supreme Verdict slots, and those are either more all-encompassing or more efficient. So I think you have to be in the market for fighting to make that a card you would want to put in your deck.
Interesting.
Now these decks might be in the market for fighting. They do generate 3/3s for 2 mana and 5/5s for 4 instant speed, so not unreasonable. Fleecemane Lion to the party here, into the face of Jason Elspeth. And Eric just going after his deck now.
Now these blue-white decks have long since played 4 Detention Spheres. Do you think there's any chance they're going to play the new Banishing Light, the new Oblivion Ring?
I think there's a really good chance. Often in the mirror match, you would like to be Oblivion Ringing Detention Spheres, and the fact that it's not overlapping means that you can get your opponent's Jace while you have a Jace in play. Detention Sphere in the mirror match can be pretty awkward at times, so I think there's an argument. I don't think it's going to replace Detention Sphere necessarily, but you could supplement it or play some in the sideboard.
Now, at this point, is Michael primarily just trying to gain information about Eric's list?
I mean, you never know. You might as well just keep fighting here. But I think at this point he's seen all of the weirdness that Eric's list has. He has the main deck Celestial Flare. He has the main deck Jace, Memory Adept. You've seen kind of the weirdness. The main deck Revoke.
What do you think the chances are that Eric draws too many cards and runs out?
Pretty low, pretty low with the elixir in the deck. He is also racing his own decking by milling Michael for 10 cards every turn. So,
yeah, he's got a lot going on.
He may execute the flawless victory where he runs him out of cards and attacks for lethal in the same turn.
Sure. I could see why it'd be important to do each of these one at a time.
Well, you don't want to accidentally flip over too many and get some sort of penalty.
Absolutely. Eric down to 19 cards in his hand. He does drop the elixir. So this is what I mean. Did Eric actually need to play the elixir here?
I don't think so. I had to imagine getting milled for 10 here is going to successfully erase this.
Yeah, like, why reveal the information? Why not just hold the elixir if you've got it locked up, right?
I don't think the information about whether or not someone has an elixir changes too much. The assumption has to be that there's an elixir in the list.
That's true. What's sure if they're playing just straight blue-white?
And it's funny, Michael's, all told, drawn fairly well in the intervening turns.
Yeah.
He's drawn a
went
relevant spell every turn.
He went straight up to 5 and never drew another land the rest of the game.
But that early Supreme Verdict and the advantage that Jace generated was just too much, and Eric up a game. I was going to say quickly, is actually fairly quickly all told for a blue-white with no creature win. But
and we're not talking like Adrian Sullivan speed of play, but we're talking pretty quick.
Yeah, Eric was playing this deck also in Milwaukee, so a lot of expertise here. So moving on to the sideboard here, I have Michael's in front of me. There's a Pithing Needle, 2 Glare of Heresy, 3 Revoke Existence, 2 Pit Fights, a Blind Obedience, a Tristani, and a Ajani Call of the Pride, and 4 copies of Mistcutter Hydra. I think the Pithing Needle, the 2 copies of Glare of Heresy, the Ajani, and the Mistcutter Hydra, all reasonable cards to bring in. And he does have some easy cuts, especially his 3 main deck copies of Unflinching Courage, which can quickly leave the deck.
Yeah, absolutely. I think easy cuts is a good way to describe the main deck at the moment. There's a lot of tricks that are going to be situational that don't match up particularly well against the blue-white deck. He's going to want to go with more of the resilient threats. Pro blue, so good here. I'm not sure if how many reactive cards he can afford to bring in, but the nice thing about Glare of Heresy is that it doesn't just hit the Detention Sphere, it can also backdoor hit an Elspeth.
Yeah, I don't know. The big question to me is whether or not he wants a card like Experiment 1. It is good on the surface against blue-white control decks, as, it can grow pretty large. The Regenerate Clause matters against Supreme Verdict, but I think that card just induces you to play into Supreme Verdict, and it wouldn't surprise me if he sideboarded it out and just wanted, like you mentioned, resilient individual threats.
I actually think Pithing Needle is going to be really important. The ability to name Jace Architect of Thought helps so much. Takes a lot of pressure off of his attack phase. On the other side, Eric primarily just tuning little cheap efficient answers. Like I think Dispel, real good. I actually think Negate's good enough. Mm-hmm. It's not as efficient, obviously, but it's still pretty decent. Glare of Heresy, excellent. Last Breath, kind of questionable. I'm not sure if he wants more Celestial Flares or Last Breath, but if he does, he has access to more cheap removal. The big question mark, I think, is Faded Retribution. I'm generally a fan of this one here, and I think that the way the green-white deck has to play is slow enough that you have time to set up this sweet instant speed Faded Retribution, particularly if they end step an Advent of the Worm.
Yeah, and you have things to induce the Rootborn defenses. That's the worst thing about Faded Retribution, right? If it's expensive and you've played it into the mouth of a Rootborn defenses, that's really bad. But with the Supreme Verdicts and even just forcing Michael to advance his board in certain spots because you have a Mutavault back on defense and a Jace that's plussing or whatever, he may be able to slog through those Rootborn defenses, and then Faded Retribution can clean everything up.
Yeah, I think now who do you give the edge to after board?
I think Michael has a slight edge. It's always challenging.
Michael does?
Yeah, I think Michael does have a slight edge. It depends how he sideboards exactly, but I think he has the right mixture of being able to get some pressure on the board, being able to protect himself from Supreme Verdict, and making some of Eric's one-on-one cards pretty challenging to play in the face of things like God's Willing.
I think I got to give the edge to whichever one of these two players casts the most Sphinx's Revelations.
Sure. If it's 0, well, what if it's a tie? What if it's tied at 0?
In that case, I think it's a coin flip.
Provides the easiest inevitability in the format. By quite a bit.
Man, what do you think about Sphinx's Revelation as a card? It's going to be legal, what? Just 3 more months?
No.
4 more months? 6 more months? Oh, yeah, that's right, because of the core set. So we're on the home stretch of Sphinx's Revelation's standard career.
Yeah. It's just a really powerful thing that happens. And I don't see any reason why it would become less prevalent as the format progresses, unless control decks as a whole just became not viable.
So there is that Experiment 1 that you were talking about.
Now, on the play, it has the potential to be good, especially backed up by this kind of draw. This is a really good start for Michael.
Absolutely. And this is right now as everything is going right. Voice making it real awkward for Eric. Glare of Heresy, the perfect answer.
But again, he had to play a Ravnica dual land untapped. If Michael can evolve this Experiment 1 this turn, now he has a 3/3. That doesn't care about Supreme Verdict because it can regenerate. So missing here is a big deal. If Michael doesn't have a third land, this is pretty rough as you see the Soldier of the Pantheon and no third land, but a much better start for Michael than in that first game.
An Azorius Guild Gate coming down. It's like a Temple of Enlightenment that saves you the work.
Yeah, you don't even have to bother. Just leave it on top. And there is the brutal Azorius Charm against an opponent missing land drops. And the hand, it has some of the problems that you were talking about, too. A lot of reactive cards right now. And you see one of them get to play here, a Pithing Needle.
Presumably naming Jace Architect. Jace, Architect of Thought. A smart play.
Now, Eric's hand is actually not great right now. He has a Detention Sphere. He was planning on playing Jace this turn.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he was really counting on that.
His hand otherwise is Elspeth, 2 Supreme Verdicts, and a Jace. No more mana, so if he's able to redeploy this Pithing Needle, Michael's got a little bit of game.
Yeah, I would have considered just playing Jace. I mean, odds are he won't even attack it.
Sure.
The Needle's in play. And then next turn, Detention Sphere and use Jace immediately. If he did attack the Jace, you can always plus it.
So Eric now forced to use a Supreme Verdict just to handle that Soldier of the Pantheon. And Michael fires back with that Experiment one. So Eric's still missing a 6th land. Gonna rev for 2 here to try to find it.
And he does. Goes ahead and scries.
Now the pressure is really on Michael to find something awesome to do this turn.
Yeah, I mean, this hasn't been a bad opening as far as, you know, being stuck on 2 goes, but man, that's not what he needed. So many reactive cards.
And now Eric with a lot of breathing room here to deploy this Elspeth to the table. Well, that's why I don't like these beatdown decks sideboarding in Galare against blue-white. I mean, answering Detention Sphere is fine or what have you, but Elspeth often only needs to be in play 1 turn to do something really impactful.
Yeah. I mean, it could be worse. It could be a Revoke Existence.
That's true.
And it looks like Eric is going to run away with it now that he's on the Sphinx plan.
And there's a rev for 4. As is so often the case, the first rev sets up the second one.
Yeah, I had a feeling whoever cast Revelation the most in this Revelation-intensive matchup was going to have the edge. So far, it looks like that is proving to be the case.
And that's the problem with decks like green-white aggro against blue-white. Even when you have all the pieces in your deck to make the matchup good, you have threats that are hard to remove, you have root-borne defenses, you can play stuff at instant speed, and so on. You're still so timing sensitive, because if you stumble, the blue-white control deck can just beat you by resolving a large Sphinx's Revelation and trading 1-for-1 with your cards.
Yeah, the other thing is they also just don't have as many copies of their key card, Sphinx's Revelation.
Yeah. They are down 4-0 on Sphinx's Revelation.
Detention Sphere comes down. Eric getting a nice little Jace activation here.
Michael here with an end turn Selesnya Charm, trying to build up his board a little bit, involve his Experiment 1.
What does he need to try to turn this around? I mean, obviously he's a little behind right now, but what does he need to try to make a game of it?
Well, he does. Eric has taken some damage. He's at 15 because he's revved a few times, but he has taken some hits. Keep in mind, Michael has Advent of the Worm and 1 sideboarded copy of Ajani. Now, we don't know if he brought in Ajani or not, but that is a backdoor 10 points of damage out of nowhere. If Michael's able to get in a couple more shots and Eric gets sloppy, that is potentially a way to win this game.
Absolutely.
And it surprises me that these green-white decks don't play Ajani more often. In my mind, they're probably the best suited deck in the format to take advantage of its power, because you have a lot of little creatures that are very good to be plussing with Ajani, and then you have Advents, which are awesome to be minusing Ajani and flying in double strike with. So I usually like a couple of copies in the main deck of these lists if they can afford it.
Now, Eric has a pretty good grip on the game in terms of the board. What he doesn't have is a source of additional card advantage. I mean, obviously, he's already revved a few times. He does have another rev in his hand.
Yeah, and Jace.
Well, Jace doesn't...
Yeah. Now the Detention Sphere has been reemployed, so...
Yeah, it's amazing how when you draw this many cards, you can keep finding answers to...
He just keeps top decking. It's unbelievable.
I want to know what makes his cards so good that he has to draw so many.
Yeah, it's almost unfair. And you see Michael now with Boon Satyr in hand. This is another issue with the gray and white deck. The colored mana is very sensitive in this deck. You still, you have 8 forests and 7 plains, usually that many basics of 2 different colors. A hallmark of the mana not being very good, particularly when you're trying to play both Soldier of the Pantheon and Experiment 1.
Do you think it's possible these green and white decks are going to want to adopt a mana confluence or two?
Oh, for sure. I think there's no question this deck wants some of that. When I see this deck lose games when it draws lands and spells, it's usually because it's missing double colored of some mana, or can't cast its Soldier of the Pantheon on turn 1 because it has to play Temple of Plenty as its first white source or whatever. I think this deck's definitely going to make use of that card.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's unfortunate if you ever have to play against like a red-white burn deck, but against mono-black, against blue-white control, it's not the biggest issue in the world to have to take a few extra points of damage.
And green-white's traditionally pretty good against decks that are pressuring your life total. Other beatdown decks, you have the best rates on power and toughness to mana and access to unflinching courage, so you're not really worried about your beatdown matchups so much. It's more of this kind of stuff. As you see, the third Revelations here for a full 7. And I think, Michael's going to respond here with the Advent, but I imagine it will be trivial for Eric to get this off the board. Eric takes a big untap here.
Yeah, big is a pretty good way to describe it. Seeing as he has 17 cards, now 16 cards in his hand.
He does appear to have the Detention Sphere at the ready for this Advent token.
Eric debating his options. Is it better to Detention Sphere it, to Celestial Flare it, to... the advantage to Detention Sphere here. 1 less card he has to discard.
Yep. Also means he doesn't have to play into any of Michael's potential tricks. You don't care about the Detention Sphere getting blown up if it's targeting a token, so... None of this matters too much, but I do believe Eric is correct there in deciding to use Detention Sphere. And now has to discard a hand size.
Picking out the 7 he wants to keep.
Imagine it'll be counter spells and removal spells of some persuasion. And Michael with 2 copies of Rootborn Defenses that he was not able to put to good effect, and a good demonstration of what Blue-White's capable of. That's his haymaker in the matchup, and it's unlikely to do very much. And now I think Eric may be looking to just simply go ultimate with Jace to try to win this game.
Time is on Eric's side. Yes, it is. What's the card in Journey into Nyx you're most excited about? I mean, obviously, Mana Confluence is going to be kind of an exciting one. Here we see a Dissolve for the most recent threat Michael's tried to present.
For me personally, or
yeah, for you personally. There's, I mean, Magma Spray. There's Eidolon of Great Revels. There's, I mean, there's a variety of
What's the Bestow Mad Dog called?
Dude, that guy is so hot.
I can't wait for that one.
That one's my favorite of the red beatdown cards.
Yep.
For those not familiar, it's 1 in a red for a 2/2 that must attack each turn, and it has Bestow of 2 in a red, and it makes the enchanted creature obviously have +2/+2 and must attack each turn. That one does a lot of nice things.
Yeah, there's a lot of. I'm going to be writing about that this weekend actually. So, I'm going to be doing my red box review for Starseed this coming week. There's going to be a lot of words on that guy in Standard.
Yeah, I mean, outside of the fact that you can cast him off a Burning Tree Emissary, well, he also can serve as a very potent 3-drop. I mean, that's exactly what you want, is you want to have the option so that you make sure to use your Burning Tree Emissary when it comes to that. However, he adds a lot of power. You know, he lets you actually make a threat that's like a legit, real threat.
Yep.
That guy seems exciting. Plus, if you're doing anything fancy, I mean, he also works well with, you know, like the Bestow, with the heroic cards, or if you're on some kind of like a Madcap Skills type of time.
Yeah. There's a lot of different dimensions to that card. Playing in a bunch of different decks.
Yeah, there's a number of sweet Bestow cards in the new set. Kind of exciting how much they pushed, like, for instance, the Gnarled Scarhide, the, black for a 2/1 can't block that for 4 mana can make the enchanted creature +2/+1 and not able to block.
Yeah, black definitely has a really solid base of little aggressive creatures at this point to build a deck out of.
Oh, yeah. Tormented Hero, Rakdos Cackler, and Gnarled Scarhide for the full pack, beatdown package. Painseer, a totally reasonable 2-drop. Herald of Torment, another nice 3-drop. Mogi's Marauder, if you want to go that way.
Yeah,
Plenty good removal. Thoughtseize if you want the option. The question I have is, what's the second best 2-drop? What do you play besides Painseer in your Suicide Black deck?
The Spiteful Returned, I think, is the card you want there.
He does a fair bit of damage. 1 in a black, 1/1 when he attacks, do 2 damage to them with a Bestow of 3 in a black. The nice thing is that between Herald of Torment, Gnarled Scarhide, and Spiteful Return, we're talking about a lot of resilient threats, a lot of ways to Voltron up and build a big threat, but also to give you protection against Supreme Verdict.
Yep. See, Eric here going ultimate with Jace. The final ignominy here appears to be Michael will be killed by his own Advent token.
Yeah, that's kind of how Jace gets down.
Yep. That should teach you a lesson about playing powerful cards in your deck.
Michael
Jace just gets it.
Oh, yeah. Jace does just get it, though. That's the thing. That's a guy who, he just gets it.
It just understands what's going on.
Yeah, he's got his finger on the pulse of life. Tristani.
Looks like Eric actually has the last breath for this one.
Yeah.
I said final ignominy, but I was wrong.
There's more.
This is the final ignominy.
And it looks like he doesn't even bother.
Yeah, he was willing to attack into the Tristani there, probably to Azorius Charm in the event that Michael was willing to block.
Sure, makes sense.
Instead, Police main line shows up a little late to the party.
Not as strong a combo with Tristani as some, but not super relevant in this position.
Yeah.
Eric checks. It is in fact a card, puts it on the bottom. The second wave, he sneaks it in.
Michael was building up to get to exactly this position.
Yeah, he's got enough mana to monstrous it next turn. And that's the hand. Michael Barger extends the hand. Eric Rill wins 2-0.
Pretty straightforward win there for Eric, and